right, everyone. Well, welcome so much to our presentation. My name is Maya Garza, and I am the Regional Vice President for Behavioral Science at BetterUp, and I'm really excited to be speaking with you today about the secret weapon of resilience in today's crazy whitewater world. I did want to just very quickly, before we dig in, I'm going to give you a couple of ideas in terms of how best to participate here today. So one suggestion that I do have for you all is to go ahead and open the direct Zoom link that is kind of in the bottom of your conference set up. So that way you can join in our chat conversation. So that will be kind of the best way for you to participate with us. So feel free to go ahead and click on the Zoom link and join through that format. Again, you can do that by clicking on that link, and you'll have additional live streaming options there below. So direct access link in case that is helpful. And we'll go ahead and kick things off. So again, my name is Maya Garza. Really happy to be speaking with you all today. This is our third year participating in Learn-A-Palooza, and it's always such an exciting opportunity. I wanted to share just a little bit about BetterUp with you all. Our mission is to help people live their lives with greater clarity, purpose, and passion. And oftentimes that is, or I would say like maybe even in the best of times, a bit of an audacious mission. But today more than ever, I actually think this is even more critical as we're living through 2020, a year that we never thought would happen in this way. So this is something that we really believe firmly and deeply is something that is kind of almost an inalienable right of every individual. And we want to be able to support people and working professionals everywhere to live their lives with that clarity, purpose, and passion. And that can be hard in today's time. So that's one of the things that we're really going to talk about today is ultimately how to do that. So a little bit about us, we offer professional coaching and learning and personalized growth for individuals at scale. We transform organizations and help them achieve their business objectives through that one-on-one personal connection. And that's a pretty amazing thing to do. And so one of the things that I'll talk to you about today is some of what we have learned through this experience of helping people learn and grow and be better professionals and be better individuals within the context also of a world and an organization or multiple organizations that are going through some very troubling times. So here is a little bit of an agenda for us today. It's a tale in 3 chapters, I'll say. How are workers doing in a post-COVID or really a middle of COVID world? And then we'll dig into the not so secret weapon of resilience. I think you all know that this is what we'll be talking about. And I will say that we're going to share quite a bit of data with you. And that data is based on research that we have done both with our members and with working professionals that aren't BetterUp members and participants. And it gives us just this really deep view into how people are doing today, as well as what we can do for them to build resilience and then build their capacity to show up as their best selves and for organizations to thrive, okay? And then we'll share a little bit of nuggets of these additional kind of recipes for how you build resilience in organizations. I do want to say, again, if you joined us directly with the Zoom link, the direct access link, members of our team, Aaron and Jeremy and Evan are going to be in the chat as well, and they'll help facilitate that discussion as I'm going to be going through and sharing a lot. So I want to jump in here with a really neat photo, and this is your first opportunity to use that chat. So hopefully you're there in chat with me, and I'm going to bring that up because I would love to see the chat here as well. Question for you all, feel free to answer in chat. Does anyone know who this individual is? He looks very handsome in this uniform. Yes, Joaquin, this is the chat that we're supposed to use. Welcome. So anyone know who this person is? I'm not seeing any responses yet, so maybe you all are not quite sure who this is, and that's okay. This handsome devil happens to be, is he from Jurassic Park? I love it, Beverly. The crystal, yes. So this is my husband. His name is, yes, he is a Navy officer. Good thinking. Parks and Rec. Sean, he's going to think that's hilarious. So no, not any of those things. Real live person. This is him in his other uniform in one of our costume Halloween parties. I will say we had a little bit of a third edition since that picture. And I share this with you a little bit because resilience for me is particularly personal. It's something that I think has been a hard-won skill, and I'm still working on. And it's because of the experiences that I've had with my husband. I think when we first met, the military life was very new to me. And as much as he tried to prepare me for anything and everything, there's so much that you learn about as you go along the way. And one of those things that you learn and you maybe get used to, or not so much get used to, but you learn to work through, is moving every 2 years or so. It's not knowing what's coming next. And one of the skills that I really had to pick up is both that resilience and the agility to move through to the next phase and be strong for the family and for the kids, and learn about the value of building resilience even in your children, COVID craziness aside. So this is something that's very personal to me, because right now Victor is on a Navy carrier out in the ocean, far, far away. He left in April 1st. That's an April Fool's joke for many folks. So it was no joke on our end. And he's likely not going to be back until about next year. So you learn about, how do you say goodbye and move on with your life and do the good things for your kids and your family and yourself. And there's the skills that come with that. And I think for military spouses, men, women, for military children, that building resilience is something that's kind of at our core. So it's something that I know quite a bit about from a very personal perspective, and one that I think is so important for us to think about in our daily lives, because it might not be, dealing with deployments and moves and whatnot, but it is, how do I completely rethink what my career looks like, what my day-to-day work life looks like in the current reality of COVID? How do I deal with the social unrest and the anxiety that is out in our world, and how is that impacting our family? That is so critical. And as organizational leaders and as learning professionals, what should we be thinking about today and into the future to build the resilience in our workforce? So that's what I would love to talk with you about. So I shared a personal story with you. I'd love for you to take a moment, and you don't have to share this in chat, but if you do, I think it'll be great for all of us to kind of learn from each other. Is think about like the most resilient person you know. What did they do that makes them resilient? What are those characteristics or behaviors that they demonstrate, or mindsets that they have? Like, in your mind, what makes them resilient? Why are they that example of resilience? And I would love for you to share that here in chat, and then we can all learn from each other. And as you do that, oh, I love this. Thank you. They're self-aware. They're tough. Species 361 first. I love your name for yourself. But your mom, yeah, she just keeps going. Lisa, I really love your note there about it's self-love, it's acceptance. We like to call that self-compassion, being empathetic, absolutely asking for help when you need it. Those are great characteristics. I love you. I love all of you sharing kind of like those little nuggets, and keep those in mind. And I love that the mental models, absolutely, as we go through, because this will be important for our conversation. So very quickly here, I'd love to make a quick transition and talk a little bit about how people are faring during this pandemic, because it keeps on going, right? Like, I love the phrase earlier on, it was a post-COVID world, but it's like, it's intra-COVID, like we're in it right now. So what's going on with folks? And before I share kind of what we think is happening, I would also love to hear from you. So go ahead and use that chat. We're not going to do like polling questions, but you can use chat in the same way, and feel free to drop in one of the letters here. So how have you personally been impacted? Are you emotionally exhausted? Are you experiencing increased sadness? Are you more irritable, generally more confused, worse, less sleep? Are you more angry, maybe feelings of guilt? Someone said all of the above, absolutely. Or maybe you can even say, gosh, like none of this is impacting me. I'm kind of feeling pretty good, and that's okay as well. And that's great. We'd love to hear what your secret weapon is. But yeah, I'm seeing a lot of worse sleep, a lot of more irritable, a lot of emotionally exhausted. Absolutely. So a little bit of both. Yeah, feelings of guilt. We hear that a lot from parents as well. So here's what we found when we asked several thousand of US workers. How are they feeling? And as you can see here, absolutely, very much like you, Maggie, yes, all the way, just so much more emotional exhaustion. It's taking a lot out of us. There's a lot of increased sadness in our day-to-day. We're not sure what's going to be happening. Definitely more irritable. We have those triggered, that anger that sometimes comes up, and absolutely more guilt. So people aren't doing great. There's a lot that we are holding in, and sometimes it's exploding, but that we're working through. Mary, you're curious about the study. We are happy to share that with you. It was, I think this one was about 2,000 to 3,000 individuals. So what does that mean for us? Well, the reality is that we are not okay. So that same study was based on a group of individuals that are not BetterUp members. So they had no affiliation with us at all. But one of the things that we did start doing with our members, the people who are receiving coaching, thousands and thousands and thousands of individuals across the world, is in March, right after COVID was declared a pandemic, we started to track this one question of people's self-reported well-being. And what we saw is these massive drops at certain key points in time. So of course you can see like the drop in people's self-reported well-being when COVID was declared a pandemic. There's another giant drop you can see in June, when the massive social unrest happened as a result of the occurrences in our country around Black Lives Matter and what was going on there. So people are really feeling this deep inside. And then when we had the second wave of COVID, there's another drop. So they're not doing well. Folks are not doing well. And that can be a really hard place to be in. They're hurting. So what do we really need to do about that? How do we think about it? And is there that way ahead? And this is what we do want to unpackage a little bit more, is what does that way ahead look like? And obviously, we do believe, based on our research, what we've seen is really working for folks, and what's inculcating folks is around resilience. And what we've actually found is that resilience, and this is data that is now our own members, is that when folks are higher in resilience, then they have a lower disruption to their sense of just general disruption to their work, and they have higher well-being overall. So there's this almost inculcation factor with resilience that is proving to be pretty powerful. And in fact, what also happens is that inculcation, or this like protective factor of resilience, is helping folks through a lot of the COVID-19 challenges. One of the things that we found in this massive study that we did with working professionals is their sleep was suffering, social connection was suffering, optimism was really low. In fact, people were feeling pessimistic about the future, and we were looking at like, what does the next 6 months look like to you? People are feeling very pessimistic. But then when we sliced and diced that data, we found, one, women's sleep and social connection suffers more than men's. So it's a really interesting break there. And then People who were higher in resilience actually had a smaller reduction or disruption to their sense of social connection. And they had less sleep issues, as you can see here, than people who were less resilient. So again, there's something about resilience that is telling us that it is protecting people. So quick pause here and thinking about the people that you had in mind when I asked you about, what are the characteristics of the most resilient people you know? So I want to just quickly, not so much do a formal definition of resilience, but anchor us into what do we mean around resilience. As learning professionals, we know if we've never failed, if we never stumbled, we probably are not experiencing a lot at all, right? Like that is a core tenet of growth as individuals. And the reality is that mistakes, loss, disappointment, failure, even trauma, they are a normal part of life. And especially now, this is our reality. So it's an opportunity for us to learn from and bounce back. And what we find is that these situations can be a source of growth for us. So the resources that we cultivate during this time, or even before, like if we were not in a pandemic, but if we think about what does it mean to grow and be an adaptive and agile individual and professional, there are resources that we can cultivate, skills and capabilities on how to respond to really challenging situations, how to respond to trauma and massive disruption. So those resources determine whether or not we are held down by the weight of the experience that we are going through, and for some people potentially permanently, or we bounce back and we can grow even stronger. And it's that bouncing back and that growth to be stronger that is so critical. Ooh, very sensitive keyboard there. That is so critical. And that's what I want to land on for a few minutes here. Resilience is not a new thing. Of course, as learning professionals, you all know this. It's not a fad. It's not something that's just come up now. It's an area of research, even that's been around for 5+ decades. That's been dug into quite a bit. Marty Seligman, many of you all might be aware of, the father of positive psychology. He's on our science council as well, one of our greatest advisors. He started doing resilience research several decades back with the Army, and even worked in an area now called kind of post-traumatic growth. This idea of and the finding that there are people who go through challenge that ultimately end up bouncing back and becoming stronger. And that there is a lot that we can learn about that. And often when we talk about resilience, especially sometimes what I see in recent months in like kind of pop culture and pop articles that are on the interwebs around what we should be or shouldn't be doing, it kind of talks about resilience as a switch that you can turn on or off. Right? Like you just need to be more resilient. So turn on that resilience thing that you have in you. But the reality is resilience is an outcome. It is an outcome of learning new capabilities and skills. And therefore it's something that you can learn and become more resilient, but it is a journey that you have to go through. And one of the things, or maybe one of the examples that I think is kind of the best one that I'd love to share with you all, and maybe it can be a little bit of a puzzle for us to chat about, is Olympic athletes are a great example here. So I'd love for you to focus or think about that podium moment. And as many of you are probably maybe going, missed the Olympics this year. It was a pretty hard situation for all of us to think about, like the impact that this reality has on us globally. But imagine the three people or the three teams of people potentially on the podium during that medal ceremony. So you have the bronze winner, who in their mind, they are going, I made it. Thank God I wasn't fourth. Then you have the gold medal winner, and they are just ecstatic. They achieve the pinnacle of all of their training. And then you have the person or the team in the middle, the silver medalist, who the reality is in that moment is absolutely wrecked with a sense of failure and loss. Because what they're thinking about is that they missed gold by the slimmest fraction of a second. So there's a researcher at the University of Virginia who actually looked into this phenomenon and the feelings that are going through these different individuals. And in fact, specifically, he looked at what happens to the gold and silver medalists years and years down the line. How does their life unfold? And how do you think, I'd love to ask you this, I'd love to see my chat here exploded. How do you think their lives unfolded? Over the course of several decades post the Olympics, who do you think ultimately does better in life? Who achieves more career-wise? Who lives longer? Who is more accomplished? Is it the gold medal winners or the silver medal winners? What do you guys think? Gold medal or silver? Yeah, middle of the pack, less stress, check the mark. Yeah, the silver medal. Yeah, there's a little bit like, like the theme here is resilience, right? And you're absolutely right. And I love how you said this, Ellie. It's the pushes to overcome. He, in fact, found decades later that silver medalists lived longer. A third more of them were still alive in their mid-80s as compared to the gold medal winners. And they achieved more career-wise than the gold medalists over the course of decades. So absolutely, there's this thing about resilience that makes us push harder. That failure that we experience, there are some people that develop amazing skills and then they overcome. And this is something that we talked a lot about with our partners in a recent series that we did with Josh Burson. It was a 3-part webinar series with folks from Mars and from Salesforce, where they talk about like, what does resilience mean for them in their organizations, and how are people in this day and age overcoming that, and how are they using what they're learning to become even stronger as an organization. So there's something very, very magical. That's why we like to say it's the secret weapon of growth and success today. So thinking about your organizations and how you guys are thinking about resilience as learning professionals, and maybe how your organizations are thinking about resilience, what comes to mind for you? So is it something that, gosh, we're just not thinking about? It's not a thing for us? Or are you in the camp of, you know, it matters, but you're not sure, how do you develop it in people? Or maybe you're the organization that says, yep, we got it. We are resilient, nothing more to do for us here. Or, and this is some organizations like I've heard from, is they almost like to like buffer, inculcate, and put the I like to say the bubble wrap around their employees and build the structure and infrastructure around them to not have to worry about them being resilient. Or would you say like it is part of your DNA? It's already in everything that you are doing. Like you're constantly thinking about how to continue and build resilience. And I'm seeing a spread. Earlier on, we had a lot of some A's and B's of some more B's here of just not sure how to develop it, or it's already part of your DNA. Yep. Okay. A little bit of a mix. I'm really curious about that. Like we like to protect our folks. Would love to dig into that with you all. What does that look like for you? So why do I ask this? Well, the reality is because as learning professionals, we approach how we develop resilience in our organizations differently. And what can help here is understanding who the most resilient employees in our organizations are and how they come about that resilience. So what do I mean by that? So let me share with you, going back to that cross study that we did across the U.S. about how are folks faring. And one of the things that we obviously found is that in some ways, people feel like they're drowning, right? Stress is at an all-time high. But what we found is that some folks are being stressed by some things more than they're being stressed by others. And in fact, we wanted to compare two different groups of people that were even more prominent in our reality because of COVID. And I am sure that some of you are in the same boat with us. And we wanted to compare folks who are now all of a sudden working from home with their new tiny, or maybe not so tiny, coworkers. In other words, their children. And then those who, whether you have children or not, but did not have these new coworkers with them. So in other words, you had folks that had kids at home and folks who didn't have kids at home, and they're working through that. And we asked, like, what are the most stressful things in your day? And look at this massive difference. So for parents who are working from home with their kids, not surprisingly, are their number one source of stress day to day. They are more stressful to them than their customers, than the IT that they have to deal with their coworkers, or maybe the boss that is constantly hounding them, even their spouse, although I love the spouse one is pretty funny to me. This is a hard situation for folks to be in. Like, give me a high five if you guys are living through that with your kids as well. Like, how do you manage that? And that was, I mean, it was just so eye-opening, right? But here's where it gets fascinating, guys. Like, this is where you start to really unpackage the magic of resilience. What we found is when we dug into this group of people, both of these groups of people, is we found that parents and non-parents actually felt the same levels of stress, right? Whether they had kids at home or not, they were experiencing the same level of stress. So gosh, like, what's going on then? And wow is right. Yeah, mind blown. Like, what is happening? If your kids are like making you want to pull your hair out and question every decision that you have ever made, but you're still experiencing the same amount of stress, what is going on? So that's where we started to unpackage this. And here's what we found. Parents were more resilient. They had better coping skills than non-parents. They have higher levels of optimism. And here's what's really cool. They also had a stronger sense of belonging with their company and a stronger belief that their company cares about their well-being. So I love this because, I mean, this was a national study, but I gotta say, guys, we just recently did our own BetterUp internal engagement survey. And like, these results were mimicked there, right? And like, we had folks in our own organization going, I don't understand this, what's going on? And we actually shared this national data with them. And it really helped people understand the dynamics and the skills that we build in different ways as individuals, and that parents have in a different way developed these resilience skills. That's right, they have creative solutions that they've built up, and that becomes part of your DNA. And there is a stronger connection to the organization. And that one's that's interesting to dig into. But what this tells us is that you can start looking at profiles of people and starting to say, like, well, who is more resilient and why? Like, what's happening there that we can understand so that we can help others develop those resilience skills. And so when we go back to that national sample, and we also then pulled in our own BetterUp data, and we have hundreds of thousands of data points. And we started to look across different profiles of people, years of tenure in different parts of the organization, the size of your teams, are you a manager or non-manager, the complexity of the work that you're doing, the transitions that you're going through. We were able to create almost this profile of low versus high resilience. And this can be really helpful to understand where does it come from, so that we can then help other people develop that resilience. And it's not to say that resilience only comes with age, or resilience only comes with manager or leadership responsibilities. But what it tells us is that those factors, like being older or having the manager responsibility, are putting us through experiences that are developing the resilience within us, right? And so that there are the nuggets that we can pull out from that around what are those experiences, and then how do we cultivate that for others? How do we start bringing those challenges and those mindsets around learning from challenges into kind of newer employees, our newer talent, our aspiring leaders, folks who are all of a sudden being thrown into these challenging situations. So how can we bring in those experiences for them and proactively and thoughtfully help them learn from those situations? Okay, so that's where the question comes in. How do we develop resilience at scale? Okay, how do you do that? Like, I mean, if you think about it, you all are learning professionals. I'd love to hear, like, how are you all developing resilience at scale? What does it look like in your organization if you're doing it? Anyone have any thoughts? I'd love to see. I'm looking in chat here, so I'll pause. Coaching managers, yeah, Mary, absolutely. Like, and I love that you honed in on managers, stretch assignments, Chad, exactly. Push people to the limit you need to. I think your point there, Mary, particularly is really important because your managers are this linchpin, right? They have impact down and then they have impact up. So if you think about your point of greatest leverage, that is really critical because they influence in so many directions. I love the comments here around like the thinking about like the health, the mental health of your organization, as well as how do you think about helping people overcome the stress and the anxiety and manage through burnout so you can develop active skills. So I love that. All great techniques. So you'll see that come to life here a little bit. So one of the ways that we do that, and I'm getting very close to the end of the presentation, so I say that to you because would love to spend the rest of our time then having a really good chat and dialogue with you and answer any questions that you may have. So one of the things that we started looking at within our organizations is kind of like this resilience index. So that's something that we measure now for our partners. And we look at for them, how can you gauge the resilience of your overall organization? So we absolutely measure it at an individual level. So as an individual, are you developing the skills that are making you more resilient? And our coaches work with their members, with the employees within the organization to help them develop those resilience skills. But then you want to take that from an individual perspective to your whole organization, right? So if you think about, when we are working with our partners, we're coaching 500, 1,000, several thousand individuals at an organization at once, and they're each individually getting support to build their resilience, to work on their management skills, to work on their leadership skills, to show up in the best possible way, both at work and at home, because that matters too, right? You've got those new crazy coworkers that you got to manage, and if you don't deal with that, you're not going to show up as your best self at work. So they're working on that individually, but that all rolls up at an organizational level. And at an organizational level, you want to think about, how does your mass resilience help the organization move forward? And so what we found is that for organizational resilience, there are these things that you absolutely have to hone in on. And those are the things around cognitive agility. Like at an organizational level, are the folks in your organization, do they have the cognitive agility to show up to these new and novel situations, leveraging the things that they have learned in the past? Are they being strategic about where they're engaging? I saw someone earlier on when I asked, give an example of someone who is really resilient, and someone said they're very empathetic. Absolutely, you have to have empathy, and we found that as a big driver in overall resilience innovation organizations. You have to empower others. You encourage participation and you pull people in, especially from diverse points of view, and you really hone in on the problem solving. And these six, I would say, sub-dimensions are the things that combine to drive overall organizational resilience. And the difference between individual and organizational resilience is an individual is they're doing it in their day-to-day for themselves and for their teams. But when we roll it up to the resilience index and we report on this and we track it for our partners, is it then informs business outcomes. So when you look at it at an aggregate, we see changes at an organizational level. And I'll show that to you in just a second as well. So what we found, in fact, is that with coaching, that individuals that are low with resilience actually become more resilient. They can improve by 125% in about 3 to 4 months of coaching. So that's their own personal resilience. That's a massive change, right? You're not going to get that in going to like a training class and learning about resilience or reading one of those fad pop articles about the 5 steps to resilience. But it's an effort, right? This is where we talked about it's an outcome of building skills and working and additional capabilities. We also found, and this I think is just monumental, that even through COVID, that individuals who are going through, who have a coach, they actually preserved and grew in resilience as compared to individuals that have no coach at all, right? Like they don't have that support. So even through the most challenging of times, like having that support can build and grow your resilience capacity. And that means a lot at an organizational level, right? So as organizations are in many ways are looking to not just survive, but potentially completely reimagine their business model, you need individuals who are developing that resilience, who are coming out stronger, who are, as Marty Seligman would say, are developing this post-traumatic growth capacity. You need that for the organization. And that's why it's so important, okay? And we even found like our members were sharing that their own personal growth was happening as a result. And these are very personal stories. And I can't remember if I have this in here for you, but like the outcome for an organization, I thought this is, I think as learning professionals, just sometimes really important for us to anchor on what do our business leaders care about? Because oftentimes, if you're talking about like the CFO who's thinking about like, am I going to support you making our employees more resilient? To them, that might feel fluffy, but there are significant dollars associated with that. And what we actually found, these beautiful stories aside, and I think these are massively important to see that individual transformation, but we also looked at the financial performance of our partner organizations, and those that grew in resilience as compared to those that didn't at an organizational level. So this is where we're tracking the resilience index. Those actually had higher year-over-year growth. Revenue growth specifically, I should say, right? So objective financial data, organizations that focused and grew in resilience as we measured, had year-over-year growth as compared to those that don't. Now that speaks to a CFO, right? And that's certainly extremely important because oftentimes, it can be hard to communicate as learning professionals to those who are making those financial decisions, especially at times like this. So when we think about helping our organizations be more resilient so that we can achieve that growth, that can be particularly important. So let me pause there as we start to come to a close. Would love to ask you all, and I saw someone earlier say that you wanted to see the study, so we're happy to share that with you. if there's anyone who is interested in getting the full details, like the research and the data, the outcomes, and the guidance of how you can help your organization become more resilient, we have our fresh off the presses resilience report. And I think our virtual booth, that's going to be available there as well. Also, if you're interested in the white paper about the 5 key questions about resilience that you should be asking yourself, feel free to let us know. Happy to tell you more about how we are helping our partners build resilience at scale. And especially right now, what we're doing to help them through current times. So there's quite a bit that we're doing to help organizations manage through COVID, help them transition their managers from working in an office setting to now having to lead remote teams, to think about what does high performance even mean in this new environment? How are we helping working parents, especially, and I know we didn't touch on this, but I think it's part of the conversation, and it should be a really strong part of the conversation, is how are we helping individuals be allies in our current environment? How are we helping overcome, fight, and be proactive with racial injustice? And how are we developing inclusive leadership skills? Those are all things that we're helping our partners with right now in the COVID reality. So we're happy to share that with you, both either after this or I know Jeremy and Evan are going to have a lot of this in our booth as well. So let me pause there with all of the stuff that I have to share. I want to end on this note. I know all of us as learning professionals know you need to end on a commitment, and I would love to challenge you all to make this commitment. So what will you personally, start doing today to help develop personal resilience in yourself and in your organizations? We'd love to see that personal commitment there in our chat. What are you going to walk away with? Maybe give us one thing. What's the one thing that you promised to do? Whether it's sharing a nugget with one of your coworkers, or setting a personal goal for yourself, or learning and sharing more about resilience with others. Yes, message, empathy, and self-compassion. It's a huge part of resilience. It's huge. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Nazmina. I love that point. It's creating that safe space for people to talk about more than just business results. Exactly. Absolutely. I love that point. That's so important. Awesome. Well, thank you all very much. I think we have just a few more minutes here, and I would love to and be happy to answer any questions or thoughts or reactions that you all have.
Maya, do you want anybody to come off mute? Participants are allowed to unmute themselves.
Yeah, I welcome that. Gosh, I love talking to people. So if you guys are willing to come off mute, do it. I would love to.
Thank you.
Yeah. No pressure, anyone, but I would say pressure, pressure, pressure. Who wants to be the first one to speak up? This is a safe space for us all.
Hi, Maya. I got a question for you.
Yes. Is that John speaking?
No, this is Kurt
Nope.
Trainer. I'm
Oh,
with
okay. I saw
Rocks.
John. Kurt, thank you. Sorry, I saw John on mute.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Yes, Kurt.
okay. I had a question. So this is
Yeah.
about resilience during
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic, obviously.
Yeah.
So there's obviously like restrictions put upon us and things
Mm-hmm.
that are just not out of in our control.
Right.
So I'm always left with a sense of powerlessness, or not having
Oh,
power in order to
yes.
kind of dictate how I will bounce back. So do you have
Mm-hmm.
any suggestions for as far as mindset with that?
Oh my gosh.
Lack of control, so to speak.
Yes, yes. I love that you brought that up. So this is actually part of the resilience support that we do with some of our partners as well, is actually creating your control spheres and actively going through the exercise of what is in my control and what is not in my control. And that is in and of itself an empowering exercise. And so you can say like, the pandemic is out of my control. Right now, my kids working with me is out of my control, right? Having to spend my whole day on Zoom is out of my control. But what is in my control, right, Kirk? I can choose to wear a mask. I can choose to buy a bunch of Play-Doh and slime for my kids that I probably wouldn't have bought before because it's going to keep them happy. I can choose to be more self-compassionate with myself. I can choose to talk to my manager and my organization about boundaries. So there are things that you can absolutely do. I can choose, and even I love like the exercises around how to train your brain to be more positive. So like I've started doing gratitude components to our team meetings. Like what's the one thing that we are really grateful for today, to start to train our brain to look at more of the positive. Like I can choose to change how I run my meetings and where I ask folks to focus their time. So actively going through, there are things that I am saying that are not in my control and I'm letting that go. And then there are things that are in my control and I'm going to own those. It's a really important exercise. And thank you for bringing that up. I love that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah. It's a great question. Yeah, it looks like a lot of people are loving the gratitude exercise. Like that's one to do. Yeah, I even do it with my kids. I start asking them like at the end of the day, like, and I don't talk about like gratitude with them because they're mine are really young. But it's like what's the best thing you did today, or what was the most fun you had on on the playground. We're allowed to go to playgrounds now, to make them think about like, what are the positive things that are happening as opposed to all the things that they can't do anymore because they were stuck on that too. Yeah. Question
Okay,
earlier, there's one, can we allow more middle range employees access? Hypo opportunities, maybe we're ignoring a lot of talent. I'm not sure access to what, but I know if you're speaking maybe for BetterUp coaching, absolutely. Like that is something that we actually encourage folks is, and that's like the sweet spot with BetterUp coaching. Like we want to make coaching available for the majority of your organization. And we offer coaching at scale in a much, in a possible way because we know that that's what drives change, right? Especially right now, you need that social connection. You need someone in your corner. And you need someone who's helping you build those skills. So that's absolutely something that we encourage. And I think it's really important to do. It shouldn't be just reserved for the top talent. All right, John, was it you now coming off mute with a question?
Yeah, Maya.
Yes, please.
All right, so I'm still looking at the slide where really the top piece was people were more emotionally exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think all of us are seeing the trends of people who, that barrier of like, I've got this handled and I went and just flew off the edge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just kind of curious to see what you're seeing in terms of that emotionally exhausted and, of course, best things to do to counter that. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that's happening is one of the best ways to kind of think about it is that in our normal lives, we all have this reserve. All of us have a different level of reserve, but we all have a reserve, right? So as kind of stuff comes at us, we pull into that reserve, and we buckle up and we can get through it and we overcome, right? And then another thing comes at us and we go back into that reserve and we overcome. And we have enough time in between all the craziness to fill the reserve back up, right? But what we're in this year is the reality of things just keep coming at you. Like nothing is improving, right? It's like first you go from one to the next, and your reserve is empty. So when the next thing comes, and that's, John, kind of like to your point, is you just snap at that point. Like you have nothing else to give. So how do you be more aware of the fact that there is this thing that you do have this reserve, or that you need to constantly refill it, and now be even more conscious around refilling it and where your triggers might be. And one, be self-compassionate with yourself that you might hit that wall more often than you would have normally, and recognize that will happen. And two, then be even more proactive around giving yourself the mental breaks of putting in the gratitude exercises, of putting in practices around like what is in my control, what is not in my control, of using techniques like reframing, of asking for help and thinking about like what can I do right now to fill up my cup. I picked painting back up because that's something that like, and I just create space for that because you have to do something about it too. And I love, like, there was a point someone brought up about grieving. There's a really cool Harvard Business Review article that came out just recently, and it aligned the 5 stages of grief that you all might be familiar with what is going on through the COVID pandemic now. We are in many ways experiencing grief and anger and denial and then acceptance. Like, we're going through those stages, and you have to accept each of those stages, and then move through. And it's not linear. Sometimes you backtrack and you go through, and sometimes you skip around, but those things will happen. And allowing yourself to do that, and helping your organizations and the people with them to recognize when people might be at different stages, or they might be hitting that wall, John, and need some support in building their well back up, is really essential. And it looks different for every person, which is why we really talk about you want to give opportunities to everyone to build these skills. You know, we just launched about, I think it was like a month ago, with an organization. We launched with 7,000 of their managers. So that, I think that goes back to the question earlier, but like, is this just for the top, or do you go to the middle ground? And this organization is in the oil and gas industry, and they're, as you guys might imagine, they weren't doing that great financially in points in time, but they are recognizing the importance of investing in the right level of people at the right time. So you want to focus on those critical managers across the board. You want to focus on the hypos that you don't want to lose, right? Like, think about that critical talent that's going to move your organization forward. You really want to go into the core of your organization to make sure that you are building up that resilience skill in the masses, that to make sure that your organization is continuing to move forward. Awesome. Any other questions? Yeah, you're quite
Maya,
welcome,
Erin
John.
from Learnerpalooza, do you want anybody to pop any emails or anything else into chat, since we'll be grabbing that chat archive and giving it to you?
Yeah, if there's anyone that wants us to reach out with any of those resources, I think we caught earlier when you all responded of what you wanted. But if there are other questions that you have or anything that you would love to connect with us on, Kirk especially, like, we do a lot of work with folks around like building up that sense of control. What does that look like? Happy to help you all with that. And there's loads of resources that we make available, just openly available to folks, that we would love for you to leverage in your organizations. Again, our mission is to help everyone live their lives with greater clarity, purpose, and passion. And you are the stewards of that in your organizations. So we are thrilled to help you carry that mission forward in your own way as well.